the flavors of Tang is passion fruit, and I absolutely love passion fruit. So passion fruit
You
Tang,
passionate about passion fruit?
absolutely, absolutely.
Hello, and welcome to the Retireable Podcast. I'm Mike Wallace.
I'm John Sauger.
How's it going today, John?
Good, Mike. Good. Just putting out a couple episodes here, doing some recording. It's one of those things where as we get into and doing our recording, I think the more we do, the more crisp it gets. You know.
We get into a little bit rhythm,
Yep.
a little
Yep.
bit as well, and your thoughts flow a little bit better
Yep.
sometimes too, because sometimes you think too much and you're like, what am I supposed to say? And
Yep.
it's nice to have some nice good conversation. And obviously, um, you and I've been doing this for quite a while now, so it's
Yeah.
it's a little easier as time
Well,
goes on.
well, and it's funny because as we talk, as we get into these beginning conversations, and we talk a little about, hey, what's going on in your life? What's going on in your life? It is. My wife and I were having this conversation this morning. It's always we're in that last couple days. The week before you travel is always very busy,
Yeah,
And when we're in that, we have a trip coming up for my daughter graduated from Western Michigan in December, and so we're finally taking her on her graduation trip, and then we come back and we're back for a couple days, and then we sneak out to Florida because my mom's down there and she's turning 80. So we're going down there
okay.
to have dinner with her and whatnot. So we're using our frequent flyer miles from the first trip down the second trip, but so it's a busy couple of days before you leave on vacation. You're trying to take care of stuff, what
And this is
the
just
things
one
we're
other
gonna.
thing that you have to get done, huh?
So that's it. That's
So
it.
you're going to Puerto Rico?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so tell me a little bit about that.
So we've been there a number of different times. I love it down there. We've been there a number of different times. My middle daughter, when she graduated, it was kind of during the pandemic, and so it was like, okay, where do you want your graduation trip to be? Well, there wasn't as many travel opportunities, and her boyfriend at the time, who's now her fiance, her boyfriend at the time was in a spot where he was still finishing school, so we could only go during certain times. So it was like, okay, where's someplace we can go to honor this? And so she picked Puerto Rico. So then when our youngest graduated, she's like, I'm cool. Let's go to Puerto Rico. Let's do
Oh,
some of the same stuff. So we're doing kind
she
of
was
some.
not on that trip, I'm assuming then,
No,
eh?
she
Okay.
was not. But what's interesting is Puerto Rico has such a great environment. Um, my youngest graduated, part of her degree is environmental and sustainability studies, and there's so many different places. There's a bioluminescent bay, there's waterfalls, there's a rainforest, there's so many different ecological things that we can see in Puerto Rico that she's super excited to go visit and see. I mean, this girl's been around the world with the geology club
Oh,
and research
yeah.
and stuff. So she's super excited for it. So yeah, we're really excited. We get to leave and go down there, and it's still a little cool here in Michigan. It's 85 every day. We're supposed to be in Puerto Rico, so it's going to be a little shock to the system, but
Not a bad thing
we'll
to do
enjoy it. Yeah,
in February and March, right?
exactly,
To be somewhere warm.
exactly.
And so in Puerto Rico, you do a lot of exploring then once you're there too. You don't just stay on the resort property,
No,
correct?
no, no. We have my daughter kind of picked out a handful of different things. So we're staying near the rainforest, so we'll do some hiking in the
Okay.
rainforest, which is very, very cool. There's a bunch of different waterfalls you can hike to and see. There's a We're going to a cave area so she can see her stalactites and stalagmites. But what's unique about it is it's Cueva Ventana, which is window cave.
Okay.
So it actually, you go to the cave and then you get to a spot in the cave where it's kind of a broken open area and you're overlooking this huge valley down below. So you're 8 stories up, and so she's gonna, so she's excited about that. Then, like I said, there's a bioluminescent bay at night. You kayak to the bay and you see the bioluminescence. So
Oh,
yeah, all
that's really
kinds of little
cool.
things she's really excited about seeing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's awesome. No, I know
yeah,
we were on a trip together and we did the rainforest,
yep,
that
yep,
was really cool. I remember that part of it. And in certain areas is nice because not the Caribbean's not all not in every area, but where we were at we felt fairly safe too. So
sure,
that's
sure,
if you're taking your kid there, that's one of the things
for
you got to
sure,
think of, right?
for
You want to
sure,
make sure you're safe.
for sure.
And then you get to go down to Florida and celebrate mom's 80th, huh?
Yeah. It's always she's not as excited as turning 80 as anybody else, but it's one of those things. So we all decided to kind of go down there and surprise her. So my brother and his wife are flying in. My sister's actually going to be down there already. So my wife and I are flying in. So it's all kind of meeting down there.
No,
So
that's kind of interesting because I just celebrated my mom's 90th birthday like 2 weeks ago, and I
yeah,
come from a large family, and so yeah, and all my siblings, The 7 that are still alive and myself, so there's 9 of us, but there's 8 of us. We all came in from all across the country,
Yeah,
and we actually hosted at our house, and, so a lot of our friends came and some of our cousins and stuff like that we haven't seen in years. So, yeah,
that's great. That's great.
it's real fun. So, to be able to do that, and obviously it's a good excuse to spend some time with your family too.
Absolutely, I
Yeah.
always like that excuse. Well, it's funny because as we talk through as we do this podcast, and one of the things somebody had said to me is they said, I'm listening to the podcast and I really enjoy it, but my favorite part is hearing about your guys' stories and your personalities. And they love adding that in, so that's always nice.
No, and again, it is kind of funny because we work side by side in the same office for years, and sometimes we don't get to talk about just our personal lives and
Correct,
family. We talk
correct,
more about it on the podcast than we do,
correct,
or if we go on a conference, we'll spend some time together
correct,
talking.
correct.
But in the work, I
Yeah,
don't usually
you're
go to my
busy.
office and talk.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
you're
don't
busy.
talk personal stuff. So
It's
that's interesting. That's
So
great.
so it's funny, I have a quick little story. M one of my favorite things in Puerto Rico, it's gonna sound really silly, but different flavored drinks, right? You have different flavored I don't drink alcohol, but, I have different flavored well, you remember Tang,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The orange flavored Tang, yeah. Well, in Puerto Rico, at some of the grocery stores, they have different flavors of Tang.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, and so one of the flavors of Tang is passion fruit, and I absolutely love passion fruit. So passion fruit
You're
Tang.
passionate about passion fruit.
Absolutely, absolutely. So passion fruit Tang is like this delicious little treat. Well, you can order it online, right? One of the time a number of years ago, we were in Puerto Rico and we were in the grocery store. And I was like, I'm getting this. It's 39 cents. I'm buying a little package of this, and I ended up going back to the grocery store and buying more because we drank it so much.
Oh
My
yeah.
wife and I loved it, and so it's been a running joke in our family. My wife got me a Christmas present of passion fruit Tang years ago, and she spent $35 on this. Well, the last time we were in Puerto Rico, I took a Ziploc bag and bought the whole shelf of it's 39 cents a packet. I brought that back. So I had to declare it when you're coming through. You can't bring through meat or anything like that, right? You can't. But I was worried. I was like, do I have to
No
declare that I
fruit.
do I have to declare
Vegetables.
do I have to declare that I bought all this? So it's a running joke. The family, my daughter's like, Dad, I can't wait to go to the grocery store and see what flavor of Tang I want. So yeah, that's one of the things we're looking forward to is the different. You get the different meals and the different stuff. There's a
So does anybody mix the rum with the Tang at all?
Oh, the rest of the family does.
Okay.
Yeah, the rest of the family does. Some rum in their drinks and whatnot. Yeah, I'm the only one that's not. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm not a
that's what
big rum drinker myself, but that's what I remember about Puerto Rico too, is all the different places, different flavors,
we
and
are.
all that stuff too. Yeah.
We are. My daughter, she's 21. Her boyfriend's coming with us. They're both of legal age, and they are rum drinkers.
Okay.
And so we are going to the Bacardi factory when we were down there.
Oh
We're gonna check
yeah.
that out.
Yeah, you gotta. Yeah,
Yeah,
we can win in Rome, right?
Well, this is Puerto Rico, but yeah,
Yeah.
same thing. One in Puerto Rico.
No,
I got
it's funny you say that. I have a sister that lives in Louisville, and so we did the bourbon trail. My brother likes bourbon. I'm not a
sure.
big bourbon person either, but it is just so fun to tour the
So
facilities
interesting. Oh
and
my
learning all
gosh.
about that
Yes.
stuff. And it's
Yeah.
just, he got a lot more of the samples than I did because again, I'm not a big bourbon drinker, but it just yeah. So to be able to go to Bacardi,
Yes.
like again, you see
Oh,
it on every shelf. It's how fascinating is that?
well,
Yeah.
like you said, when in Rome, we when we were in Rome this summer, we talked about that in one of our previous episodes. When we were in Rome, some friends of ours went and did a pizza making class,
Oh yeah.
and the Italians were they like some of the things that you learn, like that they talked about, a what's it like a margarita pizza or whatnot, where you have like the tomatoes and the basil and the fresh, they were explaining like one of the simple things they were explaining was how to prepare the basil so it doesn't ruin the crust.
Oh really?
I was like, we don't think about that,
Yeah.
but yeah, they were so yeah, I love those types of tours. Those are great. A bourbon tour would be. People laugh at me. I've been to a number of different wine tastings, even though I don't drink. But if we've gone with groups and whatnot, I still really enjoy them because I love hearing how the different acidity of the ground and how it changes the grape and how it changes. Oh boy, it's
Yeah.
it's really cool to learn those
Well,
things.
especially in Northern Michigan, because they have all the wineries up there, and
Hmm.
and it just to learn about, like you said, it's like they found the same whatever latitude or longitude as like some of the great country, in Europe and stuff like that, and then so there's kind of this great discovery, and so yeah, the history behind it, I like that too.
Very cool.
It's so
Very
cool.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you're right. Like yeah, the acidity in the ground, like who thinks of these things?
It's well, it's funny because I had a conversation, and a different family had a conversation about that, and they started talking about all the unique things in society. One of them was the conversation of the type of milk, whether it's plant-based or oat milk or dairy-based or meat-based or whatever, I guess dairy milk, and how that changes a coffee drink.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Boy, I hadn't,
Yeah.
it's okay,
Okay,
there's
we
lots
we
of
can
that too.
digress about a lot of that stuff. You're right. Yeah, coffee is another big thing you talk about, let alone
Yes.
alcohol we talked about
Yep.
already. So maybe that's the next time we'll talk about coffee,
There
John.
we go. We'll do a coffee tour. Go to
Exactly,
Columbia.
exactly. So let's get into our subject today. When we've had this, we've had different episodes on different things, and one of the things that we see oftentimes, and we've heard about, and people ask about is the thing called indexing. Okay, and it's kind of this strategy. We're going to talk about what that means in a minute, but basically, it's a strategy that's been well known for a long time. And there's some good features of it. There's some features that can be improved upon in today's day in market, potentially, depending on your individual situation. But we wanted just to kind of to chat about it because that was a big thing probably 20 years ago. And it's still a fairly popular thing, but things have evolved with indexing. So tell us, what is an index, for example, John?
So the index is just it, from an investment side and from the investor, or also from the financial person side. So index is a basket of something to track. So you might just say the S&P 500 is an index, and I can invest in the S&P 500 as an investor and just track an index, or as a advisor I can look and say that's the benchmark that I want to compare to. The S&P 500 did 12%, for example. If the fund I recommended to you did 13%, we did really great. If the S&P did 12 and the fund I recommended did 4, you might not be as happy, right? So it can be an investing philosophy. It can also be a benchmark you're looking at.
Yeah, so originally they were pretty much benchmarks, and so you're dealing with, and probably the most popular ones, just to kind of name them, would be the Dow Jones Industrial,
Sure.
the S&P 500, the Russell
Russell
2000,
2000.
Nasdaq. Okay,
Yep.
and then there's an international index called the MSCI, which is
Yep.
the Morgan Stanley Capital International. Okay,
Yep.
so those are probably the mainstays when it comes down to that. And then so what was happening, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, is that there are many fund companies that were, back when mutual funds were really popular, and they were lagging behind a lot of the indexes themselves.
Sure.
Okay, so then it became this philosophy that, what, if we can't beat them, join them. And so then a lot of funds, and then what evolved into what they call exchange traded funds, ETFs,
Yep.
started to mimic these indexes. So like
Indexes.
literally some of the largest indexes in the world, Vanguard's got some, you see on TV, the QQQ, maybe you've heard of what they call a spider. Originally, a lot of them were the ETFs based on the indexes themselves. Now there's many, many, many different types more ETFs with these companies now. But they were mimicking these indexes, and especially the S&P 500. That seems to be like the most popular index that they were mimicking. And so a lot of people then just invested a lot of money in these indexes, back in the day.
Well, and I think where you saw it so common is, um, if you look at historically why it came about, the quote unquote rich person was in the stock market before the 1970s, right? 1970s is when things changed with ERISA and the pension reform laws, and then also with the advent of the 401k and IRAs, et cetera. Well, then as you started getting people investing, and it was like, okay, I can put money in this retirement account, and more so, I have to put money in this retirement account because I don't have a pension or whatnot. As people started getting into them, there needed to be examples because people didn't want to have to take the time, or didn't have the time, or didn't have the knowledge to go say, oh, I'm going to pick company X or company Y or fund X or fund Y. It was more, okay, what's the simplistic way, the investing for dummies kind of book, what
Yeah.
helps in indexing has done that, but not picking on it. Warren Buffett, one of the smartest investors we've ever seen in our history, it said how important indexing was, and he used to say that and he's has long running bets on this, that an average index is going to beat most investors over time, and he just kind of that point out. So it's been a very useful tool, but it derives from a necessity. People were putting money in the market. We had to give a place to go, and this was kind of the easiest route.
Well, and the evolution of the 401ks too, so basically a lot of times people had to, if you're going to invest in your company plan, they only had so many
Correct.
choices. You may have, 20 or 30 choices. And so using the indexes was a good way to diversify
When
inside of some of that stuff.
and full companies built off of that, right? Like
Yeah.
that's literally Vanguard's, philosophy is
Yeah.
indexing.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah. And
low
it's low
cost
cost, yeah,
index.
low cost
Yeah,
indexing, exactly right. No, no, that's exactly right. And then what's happening is then people start to use other indexes too, and so um, inside of those indexes, so it might be the S&P 400
sure,
or the
sure,
NASDAQ 100 or the
sure,
Russell 1000,
sure.
so what's happening now is through the exchange traded funds, especially, there's been, now lots of different choices in what to utilize. Um, but really, there's been the kind of like a paradigm shift inside of some of this stuff. Probably in the last, what, 10 years or so, John, would you say?
It seems about right. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
maybe 7, 8 years, but again,
well,
when you're getting old, you don't remember the
yeah,
dates.
yeah, yeah,
It could be 15 years ago,
yeah,
it could be 5 years
yeah,
ago. Yeah,
10-ish,
yeah, yeah, whatever.
10-ish. Put an ish
Yeah,
on it for
10-ish.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why I even asked you because I'm like, huh, when did that happen? But
Well, and I think what you've seen is if you look at it in let's 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you said, okay, I'm indexing. Most people said, well, that must be the S&P 500, right? That
yes.
was like the one everybody knew, right? Now you carry forward and you say, okay, you don't necessarily just say I'm indexing. You might say that's my core holdings, right? And maybe you kind of just changed how you defined it a little bit. And so you might say, hey, that's my core holdings, and in my portfolio, I'm just pulling a number up, 60% of my core holdings are some sort of index. And it doesn't all have to be just the S&P 500. I can have 12 different indexes. I can have an international index. I can have a value index, a growth index. I mean, I can have different types of things there. But that's my core holdings because I realistically, I don't want to miss on that, right? If the market does 20, I don't want to miss that. I'd like to be better than it, but I certainly don't want to be dramatically worse than that. Depending on your situation, but I'll use myself at 51. I don't want to miss out on a market gain. I want that. I need that, right? So
Well, and I think too, we're talking about stock indexes. There are other indexes too. There's bond
there's bond
indexes.
indexes, right?
So
Right.
so when we're looking at a
Right.
diversified portfolio, a lot of times what's having you may not where a lot of the old portfolios that we're seeing is just that S&P 500, right? Where there now a lot of them have evolved to be you could be in 15 different indexes in that portfolio, and then it
For sure.
diversifies it a little bit more.
For
Okay,
sure.
now there's advantages and disadvantages of this
Exactly.
though now, okay,
Exactly.
and so when I say what's evolved, a lot of the evolvement of the indexing is kind of the old strategies versus some of the newer investment strategies, and a lot of the older strategies were like more this buy and hold mentality,
Right.
okay, and again, this is what my grandfather did and my father did, and that's what made them money, um, you
Well,
know
and again, part of it was life too. You went to a company and you worked at that company for 30 years, right? You bought and you had loyalty in brands. I'm buying those times have changed as well. It's not just in the index that has changed. It's part of life has changed, right? You're going to pick, you're buying a washing machine. It's not just, oh, I'm going and buying, the same washing machine that I've had before or whatnot. There's 100 different brands now, and they all have different things. Do you want a Bluetooth based one? Do you want one that's upright? Do you want one that's a top loader, a front loader? I mean, it's just all the different components.
Well,
And
because
even as
we're in a global marketplace now, and
sure,
so we have to look at it, so like the buy in and hold, which is good for some of the stocks because it is a global marketplace. But it used to be where these companies would split,
yeah,
and then of course to get good dividends and so forth. So then it kind of evolved from the individual buying in stock is well, then if I can hold 500 of them instead of just
right,
just to make a flyer on
right,
which ones are great. But then what's happening now is there's billion-dollar companies that are popping up all over the
for
top of the
sure.
place. There's also billion-dollar companies that are merging with other companies or
Or
are
buying
totally out of
them, or
business.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And so the old buy and hold and even with the indexing themselves, because that even happens inside the index. Well, think about, when I got into business in 1991, what the Dow Jones Industrial, the companies that were there, was it 30 companies, right?
yep, yep.
So they're not the same 30 companies that are there now,
Correct,
right?
correct. Well, in 1991, when you started, we just did the research. Amazon wasn't around, right?
Yes.
NVIDIA wasn't around. Those are two of the bigger companies. And Tesla wasn't around,
Yeah.
right? And so none of these big companies were even around. So of course they weren't in that component, right?
Yeah, exactly right, and even some of the Apples and the Microsofts and some of these things were in their
Just getting
infancy.
started. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so yeah, some of the largest companies in the world, yeah, think about that, 30 some odd years ago, weren't even around, and so even if you had the index, eventually they got into the index, okay,
Correct.
but they may not be there, but what's that next company that you were missing out on?
Well, and that's what's really interesting in this conversation as far as why we're bringing it up, what we're talking about with it is, yes, it's there. It's a common conversation, but you also need to adapt and adjust and learn the different things to think about. Like it's not just companies weren't there, jobs weren't there. What jobs are going to be here 30 years from now that weren't there? Again, excuse me. Again, influencer.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing 30 years ago, right? I mean, now it's a job
Yeah, or
apparently.
artificial intelligence,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Where's that going to be, right? I
You
mean, are
know?
we going to be hiding under rocks and in caves, avoiding the robots, or are we going to be living with them in 30 years? We don't know.
Well, and I think really what it comes down to is that we're
You're skipping over that one, right?
yeah, exactly, we are, right? Fred Flintstone yet, right? And
Yeah. You don't know. You don't know if the robots are coming after you, Mike. I don't know what you're thinking.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, what's AI gonna actually do, right? So, yeah, maybe they can just mimic our we don't have to do the podcast in a couple years, right?
That's
Because
it.
the artificial intelligence can do it for us, right? But I think when we're looking at that too, the technology has played a huge role,
Absolutely.
and indexing where it used to be an investment strategy, and sometimes it was the only investment strategies that clients were using. It's now more of a tool. It's one
Great,
tool in the
great
toolbox, right?
explanation.
Where it
Yeah.
used to be the toolbox itself.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's a tool in the toolbox.
Well, and as you're adjusting to that and you're looking at it, there's so many different things that you can do with it as a tool. There's a thing called direct indexing, which you can do for some tax advantages and some tax loss harvesting. There's a thing called strategic indexing, which we will use quite a bit of to be unique and try and adjust a portfolio and tailor it for a particular person or a particular time, right? So there's things you can do that an advisor might look at that's really going to take advantage of it and really build out. I think that's really when you talk about this again, as things are changing, your statement of it was the toolbox, now it's just a tool of it, I think is a really great way of explaining it and looking at it.
Yeah, because I mean, there were some great advantages over time, but unfortunately nowadays, as times have changed, there's some disadvantages as well. Okay, so
Correct.
let's talk about that a little bit. So one of the things that we see, and again, it depends on where you're using it. And we've talked about asset allocation versus asset location many times before, but a lot of it is where's the location of your index. Is it in after tax money? Is it in tax free money? Is it
Sure.
in pre tax money? So because one of the things that we see is if it's an after tax money, unfortunately, a lot of the direct indexing is not very tax efficient. And
Right.
and why is that, John?
Well, essentially because you're going to get a situation where some of them are going to go down in value, and some, like, statistically it's what, like 10% is going to go down in any given year, while 10% is going to go up. In 2024, most of the gains were based off of what, like, the magnificent seven stocks,
Yeah,
or companies.
the
So
bulk of the gains.
yeah,
Yeah.
so you're going to see some disparity in there, and so that doesn't necessarily allow for that efficiency in just a traditional index component.
Well, and what's happening now, and a lot of it is with technology, and we've talked about this many times as well. Is this information that used to only go to the pension funds and banks and a lot of these fund companies now is real time to the average day individual.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So a lot of the money managers can have the information in real time, and more importantly, with the technology, and again using buzzwords like algorithms and so forth, direct indexing has become a lot more popular, especially with after tax money. So why
Sure.
don't you explain, what's the advantages of using direct indexing, especially in an after tax account?
So a direct indexing example might be, you might split up where the S&P 500 is going to have 500 different companies. A direct index, you might say, hey, let's just say I have 15 different divisions of the stock market. So I might say I have a financial, like finance as a part of the stock market, or consumer discretionary spending, or healthcare, or whatnot, right? So let's just say I have technology as an example. And I have Microsoft in my holding because that's a technology based company based on maybe the way society has identified it. And Microsoft goes down in value. Well, I can't sell Microsoft and lock in a loss and then rebuy it again within 30 days. It's called a wash sale. So that's not allowed. But if I'm just indexing and I'm direct indexing that segment, I might say, hey, technology, I might have Microsoft, but also Apple might be a part of the technology sector. So they're going to move pretty similar with each other. They're both, strong companies. So they might both be down at the same time. Well, I'm going to sell Microsoft and buy Apple, locking in a loss. And then as they both come back up, I now have the gain. So at the end of the year, I might really effectively have made 10%, but because I sold some of those losses and locked those in and got credit for those losses, I might have a 10% gain, but a 7% loss. So I'm really only effectively paying taxes on 3, even though I really did make 10%, right? So that happens intra-year. In the middle of a year, the S&P 500 on average goes down over the last 30 years or so. It's about a 13 to 14% loss in any given time period, right? I mean, not every day, right?
Yeah.
It's not or over a 1 week period, but it's down 1, it's up 2, it's down 3, it's up. I mean, we see that all the time
Yeah,
now,
we
that
see it's
volatility.
huge volatilities in
Sure.
any days, and you hear about
Yeah,
the old way of doing like the day traders, which is kind of now it's now more using it individualized because that information can be direct. The average consumer can do a direct index now. Back then you didn't have that choice. You only had the choice of the ETFs or the
right.
mutual funds. Okay, where now what can happen is in a portfolio you could own 500 stocks, literally. You
Yeah,
could, I mean, a percentage of one stock. You don't even
yeah,
have to own the whole stock because they merge your 500,000 or $250,000 into millions and billions of dollars.
right.
So you actually can own a piece of the essence of each individual stock, for that example. And then in any one year, let's say 30 to 50 of those stocks are down, you can sell those at a loss. And then have what they call tax loss carry forwards. So, or like you said, John, it might not even be the 500. It may be the best 350 stocks of
Correct.
the S&P 500. And
Correct.
you could say, okay, example you gave with technology, but okay, I can sell Pepsi and buy Coke.
Right,
I can
right,
sell McDonald's and buy Burger King.
right.
So there's different things that you can utilize when it comes down to that, and so it's just a little bit more tax efficiency. And
Not that you're recommending buying or selling any of those
yeah,
things.
not that. Yeah, there's
We
not
always
a
have to we always have to
recommendation.
remind her that.
Yeah, it's just a lot of times
Use it as an
now,
example of
instead of
saying,
just using the indexing and by using some of the direct indexing, they have the algorithms that will say, okay, so let's say for example, right now in that case scenario, if you owned an index and one of those companies in the S&P 500 went out of business, okay,
right,
you don't have the choice to sell that one company. Where if you're doing direct indexing, they oftentimes will have algorithms in there that says, okay, if a certain stock goes below a certain level, they're just
it's
going to
already sold.
automatically dumping it,
Absolutely.
and
Well, and
so now so that's why a lot of these things have outperformed the indexes now because they can control that a little bit better.
what's unique though about what you just said, what I think is really, really important is, it's more in depth than what we're talking about here. But again, you're listening to this podcast, you're wanting to learn stuff, you're wanting to. Part of what you're listening to is going, okay, well, what makes these guys unique? That is one of the things that is very, very unique is the style of planning you're going to use when you're talking about indexes. Could you simply just sit and dump it in an index and ignore it forever? Well, yeah, there are people that do that. What we're talking about is you can still use these indexes, but you do need to have an active plan with it. And what you just explained, that is a very active plan as far as how I'm going to do some tax management and some tax mitigation, which is vitally important. But how I'm going to do that by using indexes. So I think that's a really important
Well, and,
point.
and, and you don't even do that with the individual stocks. We have individuals that are exchange traded funds portfolios that do the same thing. So instead of being in one index, I'm in 20 indexes.
Correct.
And if two of those indexes are down that year, just sell those two indexes.
Absolutely.
I mean, so it can be done on a multi-level platform, or get rid of some of those indexes if that were the case too.
And I think what I'm going to say in this regard, and this is speaking to the listener, this is happening all day, every day. If this is not the thing you're getting advice on, if you're not doing this, this might be something you really need to reach out and talk to us on because this is something that this is one of the ones that I think is very often missed, very often not used by. Use the example of 2020 when we went through the pandemic. The market was down at the end of March. What are we going to say at 30+%?
Yeah.
Well, if you were down 30% there, by the end of the year, it was back up. Boy, that should have been a time you were talking about, am I doing anything? And we talked to people. A lot of people didn't want to do anything. They were nervous, but there were people that wanted to make changes. That's conversations you should be having, right? This
Yeah.
type of planning has been around a long time. Technology has made it more advanced, has made it more beneficial, has made it more useful. So it's kind of why we wanted to bring this subject up today.
Yeah, and again, the strategies are not for everybody, right? But one of the great things about working with an independent holistic advisor such as ourselves is that we can now individualize that to your
Exactly.
individual situation. And so if it makes sense, and sometimes it's hard to argue, and that's why people haven't not made the changes because they have made money.
Correct.
Okay. But
Correct.
now it may not be a matter of what you make anymore, maybe be a matter of what you keep. Not only wealth preservation wise, but also tax wise,
Absolutely.
and so it's now looking at it we talked about before through the different lenses. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that's a good
Good spot.
a good
Good
spot
spot.
to end there. And obviously, if you do need any more information, you can go to our website, fsa1.com.
Should we do the holistic happenings?
We are gonna do that too.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
that's what I was going into next,
Okay,
but
fair
I
enough.
figured this is a good time if they wanna contact us because they learned some good information,
All
John.
right, give it to him.
Okay.
Give it to him.
1-800-977-9292. I feel like a commercial now.
FSA1.com.
But anyways, so now let's digress to our holistic happening. So, again, this is a part of our program where we start to when we because we deal with families every single day that we're dealing with, and we meet new families all the time as well, and we have existing clients for some of them times decades and generations, right? But we run into things, and so we want to just kind of share some of the stuff that we run into that might impact some of the listeners. Okay, and so in a holistic type of view, when we look at holistic, we're talking about not just the investment side of things, but tax side of things, estate planning, risk mitigation, and even trying to balance your banks and credit unions and everything else
Sure,
inside
sure.
of that stuff. So, why don't you talk a little bit about what have you ran into recently, John?
So I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and it was really kind of a cool conversation. They're very charitably inclined, and we talked about, well, what is charity, where's it going, whatnot, and they've been very focused on that for years. Well, one of the things we talked about though was, can we utilize some charities to then give to the family? So it's really interesting. They wanted to make sure they gave to their grandkids before they were gone. They thought, well, if I live another 20 years, my grandkids are all going to be in their 30s and 40s, and they'll want the money, but they probably need it more in their college years and buying a house and getting their life started. And she said, I'd much prefer to give it to him then than down the road. So we talked about different things we can do. And so she had an asset that's a pretty sizable asset. She owned a bunch of different properties, her and her husband since passed away. So she was getting rid of some of the properties. Well, we've kind of adjusted to where now we're going to get rid of a property once a year, and the gains on that property, she's actually doing some donations, to try and offset that. So the property that she's selling this year, she's going to have about $100,000 gain, while keeping her in the lowest bracket possible. She's actually going to give about 60,000 to a donor advised fund. That's going to put her in the lowest bracket, which means she's not going to pay taxes on the gain on the
At
property, on
all?
the
I
capital
didn't,
gain at
okay, we
all.
seeing that 0% capital gain rates.
Exactly.
Okay.
In the meantime, that donation money is coming out like normal. She would have been given that money anyway, but a couple of her grandkids are young enough where she's basically just kind of saying, "Hey, once this pays out, once I settle everything, then this money's," so she's already notified them. She's gifting to them. So she's now really excited because she's like, "This is what I did for you, my grandkids. Now you can't spend this money immediately today, but you are getting this money by the end of the year. I will be giving you this money." So it's really a really cool thing that she was able to do and talk through. And we worked through this. There's so many different parts of the conversation that, the by getting rid of these properties, she can get rid of her LLC in time, and she won't have to won't have to be dealing with that.
The headache
She
factor part of it,
Correct,
yeah.
correct. The estate plan was adjusted on what she owned and what she's at, because we've had to follow. She's saving money because now she doesn't need insurance on these things, and in most situations, we were able to talk to her about, one of the properties she's actually selling to an outside investor, and that person is like, okay, there's a relationship now with that person that is we didn't know it at the time, but he came to us and now he is becoming a client
Okay.
because he wants some help. And so now we're actually able to piece those two together. Well, I think almost all of her properties will sell to him, but he now has an understanding of why she's not selling them as one chunk, but why she's selling them over time because of the planning we're doing. So
Yeah.
it's all kind of come together. But the holistic side is all those different parts of communication, from the tax planning, from the finance, and of course, some of the money as she sells it, it's not all going to the grandkids. Some of it is going into some investments. So we're doing exactly what we just said, some direct indexing. So she's not going to have
Oh,
a
yeah.
further tax burden on stuff. So all these things working together. So it's been a really interesting conversation in that regard. And so the obviously the names are we're not sharing anything in this regard. We're not saying this is not a hey, we're recommending this. This is
Not a
just a
recommendation, yeah.
generic example of something that somebody can do in this regard. It's just very
And we
neat
talked about
to
that many
see.
times, and that's and again, this is some of the stuff you and I have fun doing because it's a little bit more unique,
Sure.
and so not that every client isn't unique, but that's not a situation you're gonna run into
Not
every
every day.
day,
Right.
and so what you find is, most people don't, plan to fail, right? They
Right.
they they fail to plan, and so
Right.
by having that plan, and really what I really like about the story more than anything else, I think what you're saying is because the proper planning are being done, they now, instead of that money going to Uncle Sam, that can go to their grandkids,
Yeah,
and
and
so
it's
in pure, simple, it's
it's
down to
going
earth.
somewhere. That
Yeah,
money's going
that's gonna
somewhere.
go to somewhere, but she now feels comfortable because of the way it's set up now, that this is money that she didn't plan on having anyways, and then you normally would be going to Uncle Sam if the planning wasn't done properly, and now the grandkids can benefit
Well,
from it.
and the part that I really was really excited about is this new gentleman that's buying the property that's now it was a the young lady selling the property, she had told the guy what was going on with it, and they had had some conversations without us there, obviously, and had some conversations, and he's like, "I gotta meet those people." And when he came in and we started talking to him about stuff, it's kind of opened up this conversation of he was very blunt. He said, people aren't giving us this information. He's like, we know how to buy properties. We know how to sell properties. Because people aren't giving us this information. Why
Yeah.
are you guys giving the information? I said, well, it's something that we see as underserved in society. And so that's why we do this podcast is that we think this is really important information. So that tax planning in those conversations from a holistic standpoint, really important.
Well, and again, you don't know who's listening, and why we do these podcasts is some of the stuff we talk about is not going to have any impact on certain individuals, but then sometimes, like you said, it's a huge impact. This is one little thing you learn, and we
Absolutely.
learn that in life in general, right?
Absolutely.
We go to these conferences and we may listen for 8 hours, and there's five takeaways in 15 minutes, and we're like, holy moly! And that's really, that's a really good example because that might hit home to somebody because
Absolutely.
that's nice to see.
All right. So how do they contact us if they have to get a hold of us? We said it earlier in the
Oh,
podcast, but we'll
yeah.
remind them again. So
It's our website
FSA1.com,
or our phone number.
800-977-9292.
Yeah, and again, you can go to our website and directly book with us as well, or go to one of our, events, okay? And there's lots of events that you guys can go, personally in it, and we'll feature for some of those
At
too.
some of the restaurants, yep,
Yeah.
you can do a webinar, you can do a podcast listening, you can do all the different things. So,
All right. Well, thank you for listening to the Retireable Podcast. I'm Mike
and
Wallace.
I'm John Sauger.
You have a wonderful day.
Investment advisory products and services are made available through FSA Advisors, FSAA, a registered investment advisor. Annuity and insurance products are offered through Financial Services of America, Financial Services of America, FSA Health Insurance Agency, doing business as FSA Insurance Agency, FSA Tax and Accounting, and FSA Advisors are commonly owned and operated by FSA Marketing Incorporated. FSAM. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. The insurance products offered by Financial Services of America FSA are not subject to investment advisory requirements. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. FSA. A is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. Chartered Retirement Planning. Counselor and CRPC are trademarks or registered service marks of the College for Financial Planning in the United States and/or other countries. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by FSAA.